All right, hello, welcome to the last lecture of this section. We've learned a ton of stuff about locations and maps. We even learned about how to move between one activity and the next, even passing data between those two things. And so this is going to be the lecture where we bring it all together. Right? We want to take all these things and combine it into this one app that we're going to call Memorable Places. So the idea with Memorable Places is that you want to be able to save some places that you've been before and kind of put them in a list, and you can always go back and check them out on the map. You can add them through the map, but it's basically, if you've saying these are my favorite places to travel, or these are where all my friends live, whatever it is, you want to save some memorable places into your app. So the app looks like this. It starts with a list view here. If you go ahead and click add a new place, it's going to take you to a map view and currently show you where you are on that map. But you can always move around, and for example, if the user's location does change, like let's go ahead and update this to go a little bit further there. Look at that. It moves us all of a sudden to a new place. But let's say, we want to add something to this app. Like we're going to go over here. There's something really memorable to us in West New York. So if we do a long click like this, long press, what it's going to do is it's going to say location saved. It's going to add a new marker. And if we click on this, it's going to get the address of our current location. And so not only did it add it here on the map and add that location, but if you hit the back button, now all of a sudden it's one of our memorable places. And if we go ahead and tap on this memorable place, it'll take us back there, and we can see, get back to those places that we really care about. So that's what this app is in a nutshell. There's a couple of things that you're going to have to learn on your own, like how to do the long press there. Also, there's going to be some situations where if you try and get the address of something, like if I try and get the address of this river, let's see if it worked. Yeah, so I've written it so that if you can't get a proper address, that you should just add a time code to say when it is that you added this. So I want you to be able to handle that some situation. You don't have to do the time thing if you don't want to, but I think that's probably a good way to handle that. Okay, so because this is sort of wrapping up everything that we've learned all into one app, really, really recommend that you do this challenge on your own before you watch the rest of this. So please go give this the old college try. Everything you got stuck, Google it. Ask for help, whatever it is that you need. But ultimately, you can always come back and watch this lecture. But best of luck. I believe in you. Go get it. All right, let's go ahead and get started here by creating a new Android Studio project. I'm going to go ahead and call this Memorable Places. Feel free to call it whatever you'd like. And looks like good API, empty activity. We're going to eventually add another activity, which is going to be one of those Google Maps activities. But for this first one, we just want to go ahead and leave it as is. Okay. So with our app opening up here, I think the first step that we've got to do is we've got to fill out our first activity to have that list view and be able to add that top item in the list view that that says add an additional place. So let's go ahead and move into the visual side of things, and let's get a list view out here. So I'll delete the existing text view that we have, and I'll just go ahead and drag and drop a list view. And it looks like it's in a pretty good place. So let me just go ahead and add constraints everywhere to sort of lock in that position that we have. Also need to give it a proper ID, so I'll just go ahead and call that list view. Okay. And I always wondered that about Android Studio. It seems like whenever you add the ID, all of a sudden these things magically appear. It's kind of interesting how that works, but whatever. All right, so let's go ahead and move into our main activity. And in here, we want to go ahead and get access to this list view that we just created. So let's type out, we want a list view that we are going to call list view. This will be equal to find view by ID, r.id.list view. Excellent. And you've probably done this 4 or 5 times now. You should be really comfortable with this. We just want to fill out an array list and then an array adapter, get that into the list view, and then also do an on-click listener. So let's start first with the array list. So we're going to make a new array list, and we want this to be a bunch of strings. So the first option is going to be saying, hey, go ahead and add a new place, and then the other ones are going to be the names of the places. So we'll go ahead and call this places. And we're going to set this equal to a new array list that again is an array list of strings. All right, once we've got that in place, we need to say places.add. And this is just where we're going to add our very first one, which is going to be the capital add a new place, ... All right, so that gives the user an option to say, oh, I can pick this one, and then I can add something new to this app here. All right, then we're going to need an array adapter. So we'll go ahead and grab that. We'll call this simply array adapter. This will be equal to a new array adapter. And with this, a couple of things that we want to pass in here. So we're going to do this for the context. And let's get to android.r.layout. Simple list item 1. And from there, we want to go ahead and grab the places array that we have. Okay. So there's that array adapter. Next step for us, we've got to connect the list view and the array adapter together. So we'll get access to our list view. We'll say .set adapter, and we simply just throw in our array adapter inside of there. All right, now with that in place, visually this would all work out. And let's go ahead and get a run going so that we can at least get the emulator up and going. Then we need to make it so that when someone taps on one of these items in the list view, that we can display some information or eventually take them to the next activity. So we're going to type out list view dot, and we want to do set item on click listener, or set on item click listener. And this is looking for a new adapter view dot on item click listener. Boom, provides all this great stuff for us. And for the time being, let's just go ahead and do a simple toast message. So we'll say toast.makeText, pass in this for the context. As far as what to print out, let's go ahead and show what it is that they selected. So we'll do integer dot toString, and let's pass in I, and then let's see, yeah, because I is going to be the number of the one that they picked. Just want to make sure I'm doing the right thing here. Then we've got to show how long we want to show this toast. I always like the short one. And, oh, almost forgot, we got to do our dot show so that it actually shows up when we run this, okay? So let's go ahead and see. Something's not happy here. Okay, so we said... for this, I think it's because we're in this on item click listener, we have to say main activity dot this, and that's gonna, there we go. Now we've got the correct context there. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and run this and see what we get on our emulator. Excellent. So here we have a list view. There's only one item in this list view, but if I tap on it, boom, it shows me that that was item 0 in the list view. Great. So off to an awesome start. Really the next step for us, if someone taps on add a new place, we want to take them to the next activity, right? So we need to make a next activity. So let's go up to Android Studio File, New, and we want to go down here to Activity. And we could go to the gallery to pick what we want, but if we see the Google Maps here, which unfortunately we don't, I guess we will have to go to the gallery. Let's go ahead and pick this Google Maps activity, and we can go ahead and leave this name because, you know, before I had said if you have main to activity, that's kind of a bad name, but maps activity, that's pretty descriptive of what's going on here. So I think it's good to leave that name as is. So we'll go ahead and hit finish there so that this gets added to our project. Now, because we've gone ahead and added Google Maps, we've got to work with their API. That means we need to add our API key, which we've done for previous projects, but we need to go ahead and grab that. So I'm going to go open one of our recent projects. I'm going to open up the map and location demo. Let's do it in a new window. I just need to get this key and then copy and paste it. So again, I set it up so that the key would use would be available for any type of app in any situation, which security-wise is not great. If you're putting your app on the App Store, you don't want to do that. But when you're working on a bunch of projects like this, that can be a good thing. So we'll open up our other project here, and we want to get to where we have our Google Maps, and I'm not seeing that file where we list out information. Let's see where this is stored. Google Maps API. This is under values. Okay. So we'll go here under values. There we go. Google Maps API. And I'll go ahead and copy my key. Okay, I got that whole thing. So now I can X out of that project. And then I'll come paste it in here. That looks good. We'll save and I can X out of that file. I don't think we're going to have to access that again. And once we get that in place, let's now make it so that instead of just doing a toast message showing what item they selected, let's make it so that it actually does an intent and move over to the next activity. So we'll go do our intent code. We're going to make a new intent. And with this, we've got to provide a little bit of information. So the first thing is we've got to provide a context. So we'll do get application context. And then we need to say that we want to go to the maps activity .class. Great. Then with this intent, we want to be able to let the next activity know what it is that we selected. So we're going to say intent .put extra. Remember, this is how we can add a little bit of extra information here. So with this, we have to give a name for our extra. So let's go ahead and call this place number. This is just something I made up that I think is a good name. You can choose whatever you'd like there. And then we want to pass forward some information. So let's go ahead and pass the integer. And the integer that we're trying to pass is I, because I is, whichever item in the list view that they selected. So go ahead and put a semicolon there. Now that we've got an intent with the extra inside of there representing what item in the list view they selected, we can go ahead and say start activity and put the intent right in there. Okay, so with that, we want to go ahead and write a little bit of code to make sure that we're getting this information on the other side of things. So let's go to our maps activity. And while we're here, I'm going to get rid of some of this commented out code. It just is kind of taking up space here. I like to keep things really clean. And let's write some code in the on map ready. We could have done this in on create, but I think, for most of our stuff, we're going to want to wait until the maps are all ready to rock and roll. So inside of here, I want to go grab the intent. So I'll say capital intent with the name of intent is equal to get intent. And after that, we want to go ahead and display a little toast message. So we'll say toast.mate text. We'll go ahead and pass this for the context. As far as the actual text, this is where we want to provide whatever it is that they selected. And so we're going to do intent dot get integer extra or int extra. We've got to provide the name, which was, I like to kind of copy and paste these to make sure I didn't do any spelling mistakes. So I'm going to copy that, come back and paste. And then we have to, provide a default value here just in case we get something back and or it didn't come through properly. So we'll just put 0 there. But this is looking for a string and we're providing an int right now. So we're going to go ahead and just say integer dot toString, and we'll go ahead and wrap that all in parentheses. Okay. And we accidentally deleted our intent in there. So we get the intent integer, we convert that into a string, and that's what's going to display in the toast. And again, we just want length short. Go ahead and show that. Bam. Looks great. All right, so let's go ahead and run this. Ideally, what's going to happen here is someone's going to tap on that very first item. It's going to then display that it was item 0 while it's showing the map. That's kind of the big goal that we're aiming towards there. So let's go ahead and wait for our emulator friend here. There it goes. And once we're here, we'll tap on this. And look at that. We have a new activity. It's showing 0, and we have a map here, which is pretty great. We also have a marker showing Sydney, which is not exactly what we were looking for. So we'll come back and delete that in just a second. But we've got some other things that we've got to do here. All right. So it was awesome to know that we got this information to come through. But now that we know that the information is coming through, we probably don't need to do a toast message anymore. Instead, the big thing that we need to do is an if statement to see if they had picked the first item or if they had picked something else. And so with that, let's go ahead and I'm going to delete everything except for this intent.getIntExtra. We'll keep that code there. And we're going to use this to do a little bit of an if statement to see if the extra that we got back is equal to 0. So we're going to say if, surround this thing in parentheses and do our curly brackets. And we'll say if this int is equal to 0, then we know that they picked the very first item. And in this case, that means we want to zoom in on user location. Okay, so we're kind of setting the table of where it is that we want to move next. Now, in order to start working with all the map stuff, remember our constant, or the thing that we've done forever and ever, location manager, location listener. Let's go ahead and get that stuff set up. So up here at the top of the class, I guess I'll do it right here by the Google Map. We want to get a location manager that we'll just call location manager, get that set up. I don't know why that's not tabbed over. Let's go ahead and do that. We also want a location listener, and let's call that location listener lowercase, just like that. Once that's in place, we're going to want to have a function or a method that is going to allow us to center in on a particular location, and if we pass it a string, that it will display a title for that particular location. So let's go ahead and just type out public void, and again, we're just making up a name here, so there's nothing special about this, but I think a pretty descriptive name is center map on location. And you don't have to do this, but it's typically good etiquette for if you're going to do the name of a method or a function that has multiple words in it, you capitalize the first letter of the additional word. So not the first word there, but you can see we've got center map on location. This is called camel case. So with this, we got to go ahead and take in two parameters. The first one is a location object that we'll just call location. And then the next one is going to be a title, which should be a string. So we'll say string title. And with that, we've got our function, but we've got to write some code inside of there. So first step for us is we've got to create a lat long, and we'll call this user location. And we're going to say that this is equal to a new lat long. And inside of here, we just got to pass a location dot get latitude and location dot get longitude. All right, so that'll go ahead and set that up. Then we want to make sure we clear the map so that there's nothing going on inside of there. So we'll do our mmap dot clear. Boom, that's easy enough. Then we want to take our map, so we'll say mmap here, and this is where we want to add a marker to it. So we'll say dot add marker, and inside of here we'll say we need a new marker options dot position, and you can see it's looking for a lat long, and so we'll pass in user location. And on this, we're going to set a title as well. So we're going to say dot title, and we're going to go ahead and pass whatever the title happens to be. Okay. So we've added that new marker. Well, we cleared the map, we added the marker. Now we want to go ahead and do a proper zoom in on that location. So we'll say mmap dot move camera, and here we want to say capital camera, and we want camera update factory dot new lat long zoom. Excellent. And we'll pass in first the user location, and then we want to pass in some number between 1 and 20. It's really up to you of what you think the right number is here. Let's go ahead and try out 10. Maybe that's a good sort of middle ground there. Okay. So we're getting to a better place here. Still got a lot to go. So we have this option function. We need to call this at some point so we can go ahead and center that. So let's move now to our onCreate method, right? Or excuse me, we decided we were going to do this in the onMapReady. So let's go ahead and do that. But after we've gone and said, okay, they've picked item 0, so we need to go zoom in on the user's location. Well, then we need to start getting our location stuff set up. So the first thing is, let's set up the location manager. And we're going to say location manager is equal to this dot get system service. And the service that we're looking for is capital context dot location service. Excellent. And then along with that, we've got to provide here that this is going to be a location manager. Excellent. Okay, next step for us is we've got to set up the location listener. So we'll say location listener is equal to a new location listener, and it's going to provide all these new methods for us. Okay, so inside of here, the on location changed, this is where we would want to call that center map on location. So look at that. We simply just type out the name of it. We have to provide a location, which we have right there. So we'll just pass in location. And then we have to provide a title of what we want the little marker to be. So in this case, I think we can just simply call it your location. Okay. So we're getting all that much closer. Still a little bit to go here. So we're going to have to write the code in order to make it so that when someone, either says yes or no to requesting the information, that we can handle that correctly. So up here, after we've done the center map stuff, we're going to do a on request permission result. Again, this could be for any permission. We're pretty sure here that it's going to be for our location stuff because we're not asking for anything else, but just know that this can be for other permissions. And so first we're going to check and see that if we got something. So we're going to set up an if statement. And in here, we're going to say grant results dot length. Check and see if that is greater than 0. And if it is, we're going to say, okay, that, and the other thing that we want to check is say, all right, we're going to tap into grant results. And since we know something's in there, we're going to get the very first item, and we're going to check and see if this is equal to package manager dot permission granted. So that will ensure that they gave us permission there. Next, we need to go ahead and check that we've got permission one more time for the location. So this is just checking the general permission was granted. Next, we're going to make sure that they have the location permission. So this is kind of confirming that we got the right one. So we'll do another if statement here. But in this one, we want to ask, okay, context compat dot check self permission. And with that, we're going to go ahead and provide this as a context. And then we want capital manifest dot permission dot access fine location. Okay, so we'll go ahead and put that all, close up that parenthesis there. And we want to see if this is equal to capital package manager dot permission granted. Okay. So that's going to tell us if we're ready to go with this location stuff. And if it is, then we'll simply just type out, okay, location manager dot request location updates. We're going to have to go ahead and pass in our location manager dot GPS provider. We'll go ahead and do 0, 0 because we want all the information. And then we'll pass in our lowercase location listener. All right, so that's gone ahead and set all that stuff up for us. But let's go ahead and move back down to our not on create. I keep thinking that's where we want to go, but it's the on map ready because we don't want to do any of this stuff until Google Maps has had the opportunity to get the map set up. And honestly, this doesn't really take that long, but it's just really crucial that you do this here rather than the on create because it can get kind of messy there. So after we have set up the location listener, which it looks like I'm missing a semicolon for, after we've done that, we're going to go ahead and do the check to see, hey, do we have permission? If not, we need to go request it, blah, 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 which, it would take us up to this piece of code. So down here below, we are going to say if. So this if statement, we're just checking to see if we have access, which really, it's basically this function. We'd have to just change one thing. So we're going to go ahead and just copy what we have here. Okay, and we'll replace it there. And we're checking to see, hey, if we don't have permission to this. So if we don't have the permission to use the user's location, well, in that case, that's where we would want to go ahead and get request information there. So we're going to go ahead and type out to this. Well, I guess we could work with the opposite situation of saying, hey, you know, if they do have access, I guess we could just do this. Well, this is kind of different than we've done it before, but I think it's good to kind of explore this way. So we'll say, you know, if they do, I'm going to move that back to the double equal. So if they do have permission, then we'll just request location updates like we've done before. But if they don't, that's what we'll do inside of this else. This is where we'd say activity compat dot request permissions. And we're going to go ahead and provide this for the context. Then we want to do a new string array, right? And then with this, we're going to do our curly brackets. And inside of there, we'll say capital manifest.permissions.accessFind_location. Okay. Then we'll go ahead and provide one there for the request code. All right, so we've got all of that there. So that's good to go. The next thing that we want to do is, so if we were able to get access to their location, right, in the top part of this if statement, we would want to request the location updates, but we would also want to go ahead and get the last known location and get everything set up. So let's go ahead and type out the code for that. We want a location that we'll call last known location. And we're going to set this equal to location manager dot get last known location. Go out and provide a little bit inside of here. Just go ahead and say location manager dot, and we want the capital GPS provider. Excellent. So that gives us the last known location. So then it makes it very easy for us to just say center map on location. We'll go ahead and pass in our last known location. And again, we'll go ahead and just type in the string your location. Okay. So that'll pass through the appropriate information that we need in order to make that work. So we're basically there with our app. Let's go ahead and give this a run, see what we get. I mean, before we do that, there's one last thing that I thought about, and that's that, you know, let's just kind of walk this through for a second. So this activity opens up. We come down to this on map ready, right? And we go ahead and we check the intent and say, okay, if it was the very first one, that must mean that they want the user's location. So we set up the manager, the listener, right? And then we come down here and we check and say, hey, do we have access for this? So if we don't have access, it's going to skip over to this else statement, and then in which we're going to request for permission. So then it's going to ask the user for those permissions, which then, once the user says yes or no, is going to come to this on request permission result. So if they did give us permission, we'll make it through both of these if statements, and we'll say, okay, location manager, we're going to request location updates. So as we get updates, you know, it's going to call this center map on location, but for the very first time, we'd want it to go ahead and get whatever, you know, the user's last known location was. So let's just go ahead and copy the same code that we have here and just paste it up top for when we, you know, have just realized that we got permission for the very first time. This is going to help make the app just look that much smoother. Okay. And one more little thing that I noticed here is down below, we still have the code for marking Sydney on the map. We don't really need to do that anymore. So let's go ahead and get rid of our Sydney code. But thank you, Google. You've provided some awesome example code for us. All right, we've done a lot of typing without any testing, which usually is bad news as a programmer. So let's go ahead and run this and see what our emulator looks like. I can't emphasize that enough. If you ever go for like a half hour without ever testing your code, probably something's broken, and you're not gonna know at what point you broke stuff. It's usually good to build a little bit, test it out, build a little bit, test it out. So I'm gonna try and practice what I preach a little bit more with that. I'm just realizing, wow, we've got a long time. So here comes the app. I'm going to get our menu up here ready because I know that this is coming here in just a second. So let's go ahead and tap on add a new place. Look at that. It asks us the question, and I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, please allow the location. And oh, we have gotten the app to crash. Well, that's not a good thing. Let's go ahead and test out, see what we've got here. And look at this. We did not request the user permission for this code, right? So, I mean, we wrote the code to ask for the permission, but inside of our manifest, we never, no, we did ask for access find location. Let's go ahead and failure delivering result, data intent. Request permission has extras to activity, blah, blah, blah. Attempt to invoke virtual method. Let me go ahead and inspect this. So I found what the error was, and essentially it came down to a null pointer exception. So it has to do with, you'll notice here it says maps activity.java on line 31. So on this location object, it's trying to get its latitude and its longitude, right? But this location object is coming through as null. And so, and that's because I think here on the device, I didn't hit send before we did things. So the way to fix this is we should probably do a check before we go here. We're going to say, go ahead and just check and see if location is null. So we're going to say if location is not equal to null, then go ahead and do all of the stuff down below. So we'll go ahead, provide that there. This should fix things for us. And let's go ahead and see if that's the case. So I think on an actual device, it would have a location, but I guess we can't be sure. This is probably good that we caught this error now, so that, in case something like this happens, we know now how to handle it. So let's add a new place. So it'll take us to the map view and look at that. Didn't zoom anywhere, I think because we didn't have a previous location, but if I go ahead and I add one, boom, look at that. It puts one in New York. And if we go ahead and tap on this, it says, hey, this is your location, okay? And that zoom seems pretty good. I might want to go a little bit closer. I'm trying to think. I can't remember what direction is closer zoomed in. I think if I do like a 6, that'll be more zoomed in. Let's go ahead and try that out. And I mean, that's totally up to you trying to decide what the zoom should be. But let's go ahead, add new place. And look at that, because we've added the location before, it was able to do that without any errors. And the 6 zoom more out. So let's try something like 16. That should be closer. I just think it'd be cool to see a little bit, like the street names and stuff. Like if someone has a location that's their favorite, I mean, I'm sure they'd love to see a little bit more detail than what we're providing now. Now, just nitpicky me, that's a little bit closer than what I was thinking. So let's maybe try 12. This is not a big deal, but just kind of, for me, I want the thing that I think looks best. So, and as an app developer, that's what you get to do. You get to do what you think is best for the app here. So let's go ahead and set this. And yeah, look at that. I can see, other parts of New York, but I'm saying, this is my favorite part right here. All right, the next step for us in this app is we've got to make it so that if someone wants to add a new place to their map, like let's say, you know what, I really want Highland Park to be a part of this. If we click and do the long press here, we want to be able to add that location, and we want to get the address for that place, and we want to add it to our list. So if we hit the back button, it's going to show up out there. So let's go ahead and attack that. Now, the first thing that we got to figure out how to do is what code do we need in order to make it so that we can do a long press and we have Google Maps show us the correct thing. Well, again, this was probably something you had to Google. And again, I'm going to show you how I went about finding this information. So I just kind of Googled something like Android, Google Maps, add location, long press. Okay. I think maybe we could get a little more specific if we go ahead and mark it as a marker rather than a location. So I'll say marker there. You want to, as much as you can provide specific terms, that's going to help you get to the right place. So looks like maybe this could be a pretty good answer here. Let's go ahead and see what kind of information they got. Yeah, I think this looks pretty good. So this is telling us we've got to set a long click listener on our map, and then we've got to implement this lat long thing here. There's a couple more things we're going to talk about here in a second. The big one is we've got to make sure that this implements this code up here. But with this information, let's go ahead and bring this into our code. So let's get back to Android Studio. And we want to be inside of our maps activity. So we can see already this public class implements on map ready callback, meaning that this is going to appropriately handle map functions here. And you can see that this gets set here inside when we say map fragment.get map async. When it says this, it's talking about this class. And by saying this, we're saying, yeah, we're able to implement that. So if we wanted to do something similar here, like if we wanted to support our map, and let's go ahead and do it down once we have the actual Google map. If we go ahead and type out mmap, and then let's go look at the code. Right, we have to do .set on map long click listener. Whew, what a mouthful. nmap.set on map long click listener. Like I said, that's a mouthful. And we say this, well, it's going to give us an error because it's saying, hey, this thing, it doesn't implement the correct on map long click listener. So if we just go ahead and put a comma here and type out on map long click listener, all of a sudden, if we go down here, this error goes away, but then we get an error up here because it says, well, hey, you said you would be able to handle on map on click listener stuff, but you don't implement the correct method. So if we go ahead and just hover over this, click this little box, and we say implement methods, we'll say, yep, go ahead, let's implement this one. And so that will finally get rid of that error for us. Okay. So now we're in this on map long click, which is what we have exactly here. And it's showing us the steps that we need in order to implement this, right? So that someone can come in and say, hey, I want to go add something to my app. So let's go ahead and talk about what it is that we need to do. We'll go back to Android Studio here. So a couple of pieces of information. First one is we've got to get access to the map, which we can just get with mmap. And on this, we're going to do add marker. And the things that we're going to pass in there is first, new capital marker options. And we'll say dot position. And you can see it's looking for a lat long, which conveniently, that's what we get right there. So we'll pass in that lat long. After we've done that, we want to set a title on this. So we'll say title. And we're just going to pass in some sort of string like, maybe your new memorable place. Okay, we'll go ahead and do a semicolon here there, and that should finish it up. So once we have that in place, let's go ahead and see if we can't get this to work. So we'll hit run on the emulator here. I always get mixed up about whether to call it a simulator or an emulator. I mean, I think both are talking about essentially the same thing here, but it does say Android emulator, so we should probably roll with that there. Okay, we'll just give it one more second here. Sometimes it's really quick, sometimes it's not at all, but we'll go ahead and wait to see what happens. There we go, finally opening up for us. So we'll say we're going to add a new place, and this takes us to our beautiful map view. So let's say, I want to add that Highland Park. I long click here. Look at that. We successfully added a marker, and if we tap on this, it's got the name of your new memorable place. So that's an okay name, but we'd rather have it list out an actual address of what this thing is. And so in order to do that, we got to write our geolocation code, right? So where we're sort of breaking that down. So what we're going to do is we're going to write a little bit of code here to sort of handle how we want this all to go down. The first thing that we got to go do is we've got to get a geocoder. So we'll just call that geocoder. This is equal to a new capital geocoder. And this is looking for a context. So we'll say get application context. And then it's looking for a locale. So we'll go ahead and just say locale.getDefault. All right, so that gets our geocoder all set up. Then what we're ultimately trying to build here is a string that we're going to call address. And we'll just set this equal to an empty string. And the idea is that we'll take this address and we're going to, instead of saying your new memorable place, we'll put address right in there. Okay, so once we've got that, then here comes the big part where we try and go get, the location, turn that into an address, all that stuff. And we're going to need a try catch for this. So I'm going to go ahead and just set that up. So there's our try, and here's our catch. Do the curly brackets. We got to take in an exception that we'll call E And let's do our classic E print stack trace. Excellent. And then as far as this try block here, this is what we want to go to first. So we got to go grab the list of addresses from the geocoder. So we're going to say this should be a list of address objects that we'll just call list addresses. And this is going to be equal to our geocoder dot get from location. And this is where we'll pass the latlang dot latitude and the latlang dot longitude. Okay. So we've got those in place. Still got one more thing to add here. The max results, we only want one of those, so we'll go ahead and pass that and give it a semicolon. So it looks like with the list, had to put enter there so we get the proper importation. All right, next step for us is we've got to go see if we got some information back. So we'll do an if statement to check that. So the first thing that we want to check and see if list addresses is null. So we'll say as long as this thing is not null, and the next thing that we want to check is there's actually some results in there. There should only be one, but we'll say list addresses dot size, and we're going to say as long as this thing is greater than 0, meaning we have at least one, that means that we can move forward. Okay. Now, as far as the address goes, before we've gone and we've grabbed like the state, the city, the zip code, the address. I think in this case, we really just want the street address. We don't want these to be like really long things. So let's just go ahead and worry about that part. We might get, maybe a little bit more of like the address. There's a couple of pieces that we can grab there. So this is what we're going to do. First, we're going to check for something called the thoroughfare. So we're going to say if check and see that this gets here. So we're going to say list addresses, and we want to do dot get the 0th item, right? That very first one. And we want to get the thoroughfare. Okay, and we're just checking to see that this thing is not equal to null. So if this is not equal to null, let's go ahead and check and see if we can't get that sub one. I'm a little bit cautious about whether we should do this or not because it's different in different places of the world, but for this one, we're going to do get sub thoroughfare. Okay, we'll go ahead and see how this works. And if we have the thoroughfare, the sub thoroughfare, what we're going to do is we're going to take our address string and we're going to do a plus equals, and we're going to add on list addresses dot get that 0th item, and then from there we're going to say get sub thoroughfare. And we're going to add that on first. So we'll add that plus a space here so that we can, add the thoroughfare from there. And I guess maybe that this will be a little bit safer. We'll just go ahead here and say address plus equals. And this is where we'll go add, instead of the get sub thoroughfare, let's copy this, paste it. We'll just do dot get thoroughfare. So I guess in this situation, if, for instance, there was no sub thoroughfare, it would just jump to that line. So I guess this will be a pretty safe way to handle this. Okay, but with this information, this should be enough for us, right? That we should be able to pass this address down and get that. So let's go ahead and give this a try here. See if this all works out. Okay, so we'll go ahead and wait for our emulator friend. I think this one launched much faster than last time. And we want to add a new place, and let's go to our favorite Highland Park here. So we'll go ahead and click long on that, click on it, and it's not showing me anything there. So that's not what we were looking for. Let's try at a different location here. Okay, so we were able to get 49th Street there. Let's try it at a different location. Yeah, we're getting addresses. So we need to have some situation to be able to handle this if, Google Maps is not able to find a location. So in that situation, let's go ahead and go back to our old friend Google here. Just, how do we, maybe what we could do to represent this is we could get the date and time when someone had selected this. So, if you were trying to Google this, figure it out, I would say maybe Android, Java, get, or not even get, we'll say Android, Java, date, current date and time to string, right? Because that's ultimately what we want to do. We want to get the current date and time, turn it into a string. So let's go ahead and see what we've got here. Java calendar, get instance, get time. That doesn't exactly turn it into a string. Ooh, this looks fairly promising here. If you want to get the time as a specific pattern, you could use the following. Okay, I think this is more of what we're looking for. So the code that we're going to add now is, the situation where, we want to check and see, hey, if there's nothing in the address, if it's empty, we want to be able to add our own thing. So what we're going to do is we'll come down here and let's set up an if statement right before we add this marker. And let's check in on address, and we'll say address.equals, and we're going to see if it's equal to an empty string. And if it is, that's where we're going to want to, go get the date and time and put this into its own thing here. So if we go back and look at the code here, we need something called a simple date format. So we'll just type out simple date format. And there's two of these. There's an Android one and a Java one. Let's go ahead and just go with the Java one. Okay, so I'm going to call this SDF for simple date format. We're going to say that this is equal to a new capital simple date format. And inside of here, this is where we've got to pass a string of like how we want the time to be represented. So let's go ahead and just try the standard that they recommended here in the answer. We can go and manipulate this here in a second. So once we've got that in place, let's go ahead and take our address string, and we're going to say address plus equals, and we want to add this time as a string. So what we're going to do is SDF dot format, and we need to pass it some sort of date. So we're going to say new capital date, and just like that, it's going to, this new date, that essentially grabs the current time from the device, passes it in, it formats it using this, and turns it into a string. Okay, so having this all in place, we should now be able to see when we run our app and it finds a location that it couldn't provide an address for, it's going to help us out by just saying, hey, this is the time that that thing occurred. So let's go ahead and jump into our emulator here. We'll say add a new place. Let's see if we can recreate the situation, right? So we did it on Highland Park. If we click and drag, and yeah, of course, this time it goes and it grabs an actual location. And look at that. Okay, this one successfully worked. So all the information's there, but it's really, really ugly about how it's represented. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of tweaking here. So I've worked with this before, and I kind of know how the strings work here, like the YYY, this is for the year. Then we got the month, the date, the HH is hours, and then this is minutes. So I'm just going to recreate this to say capital H, colon, lowercase mm, and this does hours and minutes. And I'm going to do space 4 Ys for the year, dash, 2 M's for the month, uppercase, and then 2 lowercase d's for the day. And if you're wondering what's the difference between upper and lowercase, go Google simple date format. There's all sorts of information out there. And you may not appreciate this now, but dates and times in programming is really tricky, complicated stuff. And using things like a simple date formatter can make it so much easier to work with. If you want to do like AM or PM, if you want the dates to have a 0 in front or not have a 0 in front, like it sort of handles all those situations. It's pretty cool. So I'm going to do a long press, and that popped up an address, so that won't work. Let's try this other one. And look at that. It's saying at, 57A, like, so 0057. So this is saying this is 12:57 in the morning, 2017, 11:19. Okay. So we're at a pretty good place here, and you can see that matches up with the time. That's not my local time right now, but that's the time on this device, so we know that that's correct there. This is pretty good, right? We're able to allow users to add something there. The one problem that we have here, though, is if the user has added a location, it'd be nice when we hit the back button that it would be listed out here. And right now, that is not happening at all. So we want to go back to our app, and we're going to move over to the main activity.java, and we're going to add a new array list. So we already have one that lists all the places. We also want to have one that shows the particular locations, right? And to have a location object that the user can get to if they want to go to a certain place. So right where we have our first array list, we're going to pass another array list. So let's create one now, array list, and we're going to have this one be an array list of lat long, just like that. And we're going to call this locations and say that this is equal to a new array list of location objects. Okay, So we've got that in place. That's looking pretty good here. Oh, it's an array of lat long, not locations. That's why that was freaking out there. Okay. So one thing that we're doing right now is we're adding the very first one that says add new place. If we're going to have one in places, we should also add a new kind of dummy one for locations. So let's just go ahead and say locations dot add, and we'll just go ahead and pass in a new lat long, new space lat long, and we'll just put 0, 0 in there because we're just trying to put an empty one. The user's never going to go to that place. And to talk about that more, we'll go ahead and I'm going to show you in the code how you can get to that. Okay. So with these in place, if we want to be able to access these array lists in a different activity, right? This isn't a completely separate class. We got to give a proper name to these things, and that's going to be something called static. So we have to say static on both of these. Okay, and in order to do this, we have to do this outside of the class, the function here. We got to go and do it up on the top. So we're actually going to copy this, okay, and we'll paste it up above. Do the same for locations. Go ahead and copy and paste that. Let's make sure we get our semicolons on each of those. Now, rather than doing that, let's just go ahead and set them straight way up. It's not like we're putting any data in there. So I'm just going to cut these entirely. Paste that right there, and then now we should have access to these not only in this activity, but we can get them in the maps activity. And just to kind of prove this, if we type out somewhere locations, no, I'm gonna feel like an idiot if we can't get to this. Let's try places. So it's currently not showing it. Maybe it needs a second to update here. Let's go ahead and keep moving forward, and if we run into more issues, we'll talk about how we can fix that. So with all of this in place, let's go ahead and talk about a little bit of extra work that we've got to do down here with our address, right? So we've done all this stuff to go ahead and add the marker, right? There's a couple of things that we have to do now, though, that's that we want to add this to our places and our locations. And I just remembered what the issue is here, and that's that if we want to get to the places array, for example, we have to say main, I got to spell it right, main activity dot locations or main activity dot places, and that's going to get it there. So let's go ahead and first add this to places. We're going to say places, and we want to dot add something new to that. So let's just go ahead and add the current address there. Okay. Once we have that in place, the next thing that we want to do is get to our main activity, get to all of our locations, and we also want to add a lat long. So we'll go ahead and just add whatever the current lat long is here. So that's going to add those things to the array. And then we also want to make some sort of note to the user to say, hey, we were able to do something successfully. We want you to know about it. So we're going to say toast.makeText, and we'll go ahead and pass this for the context and some sort of string. Maybe let's say location saved, just like that. And let's also go ahead and say how long this should be. Let's keep it short here. And then we'll do a dot show on that. So this way there's some sort of user feedback to say, hey, we were able to successfully add this. Now the next thing that we've got to do is we've got to update the array adapter, that list view, to know about it, because if we just go ahead and add these things but we don't update the list view, we're going to have issues here. So let's go back, and where we're currently creating our array adapter, let's go ahead and define that up at the top with our other static properties here. So we're going to say static, paste that in there, and then we'll just say array adapter like that, which then after doing this, we can come back to our maps activity. After we've added these two things to both arrays, we can say, hey, we got to update this stuff. So we're going to say main activity dot array adapter, and on this we're going to say dot notify data set change. And that basically says, hey, go look at the array one more time. We've got some new information in there. We want you to go take a look at it. Okay. So with that in place, let's go ahead and see what this looks like. So let's just go ahead and run our app. And I guess I should get the emulator up here ready to roll. Okay, so it opens up. We want to add a new place, pick some random place here. Look at that. We get location saved. It's at DeKalb Avenue 722. If we hit the back button, look at that. We've got it in place. How excellent is that? Now, look what happens if we go ahead and we click on this address and we try to come to the map view. Well, it doesn't show that location. And you might be wondering, well, why is that? And let's talk about that. Well, if we go to our code here for the map, it does take us to the map. But when we first got inside of here, let's get to the proper code there, right? We did this big check where we say, let's get the intent. Let's go and get whatever extra they pass through. And if it's the 0th item, then we run all the code that's inside of this big thing here, right? But if it's not, like, what else do we want to do? Well, the else part of this situation is if it's not the very first one, that means they're trying to go to a location. So we should go ahead and write some code about that. So the first thing that we got to do is get a proper location. So let's go ahead and say location, and we'll just call this maybe place location. And we're going to have this equal to a new location object. And we'll say location manager dot, and let's get the GPS provider. Okay, that looks good. Next thing that we need to do is we need to take this place location and we need to set a latitude to it. So we're going to say set latitude. Now, in order to get the latitude, it's going to be a little bit of work here because we've got to reach back into the main activity and we got to grab something from the locations array, and then we've got to get, you know, the proper information from that. So walk with me here. We're going to say main activity dot locations, right? This is that list array. Then we're going to get whatever the current index is inside of that array, which that information comes from the intent. So we're going to say intent dot get int extra, in which that case we've got to provide a name. So let's go make sure we're getting the exact name, which is place number. So we'll go ahead and paste place number there. We also have to provide a default in case it doesn't come through, so we'll put our 0. But assuming that that all works out, we then should be able to, on this, say dot and get to, for example, its latitude. So that's a really long string of code, which basically what it does, it says, hey, we're trying to set a latitude here. It reaches back to our main activity, gets the locations array, gets the correct item, and we know that because of the intent extra that came through, and then we get its latitude. So to do the longitude, rather than type all that out, this is a perfect example of when you should copy and paste. So we'll just place this down. We'll change this to set longitude, and we've got to make sure that here we change this to dot longitude, just like that, okay? Once that's in place, really the last thing that we need to do here is just use this awesome center map on location function that we've already created. So we're going to say place location, right, which we spent all this time creating. Next thing that we're going to pass in here is we need to say what the title is. So again, we're going to do some reaching back here. We're going to say main activity dot places dot get, and this is where we got to get to that intent extra. So we're going to say intent dot get int extra, and we've got to go grab, for example, a place number. We'll place that in. Our default will be 0 just in case, but once we've got that, that's actually the string that we need, so we don't even have to do a dot anything after that because we should have it. Okay, so this should be everything that we need for our app. Let's go ahead and run it, see what we get. We'll get our emulator here ready to rock and roll. It's kind of the big moment of truth for us, right? We've done a lot of work up to this point. So we'll say add a new place. All right, we're in New York. Let's go up here. Oh, is this Central Park? That's Central Park Zoo. So we've added a new marker, Bow Bridge. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit the back button. Ooh, it's showing up there. So let's go ahead and tap on Bow Bridge. And look at that. It shows us Bow Bridge. Man, that is cool. Okay. So congratulations, you have a fully functional app, but there is a glaring piece of this app missing. So we just added this cool Bow Bridge, right? Totally awesome. We can tap on it, takes us to the location. It's like, oh, that's really cool. Well, look what happens when we run our app one more time. So we hit the play button here, you know, so this is kind of simulating. Maybe the user closed their app, went to a different app, pulled this one back open. Look, our location is completely gone. Our memorable places are gone. Like the whole point of this app was that we could save memorable places so that we could always get back to them. And our app can't do that. Every time the app opens, the data poofs and disappears. It's just gone. So that's the big glaring thing, but that is going to be the focus of our next section, is how do you store data inside of an Android app? And I mean store data in that when you open it the next time, whether that's a day later, a year later, 10 years later, okay, that's a little extreme, but whatever point in the future, you'll be able to get back the data that you already had. So a little bit outside of what we're going to do now, but we have a whole section dedicated to it. So once we'll learn it, we'll actually come back to this app and add that functionality in here. So let's go ahead and talk about that in the next section. Congratulations on doing all this location stuff. Really proud of you.